Hello and welcome. I'm George Crump, Chief Marketing Officer at StorONE. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about hybrid cloud and how to create a cost-efficient hybrid cloud. Getting a hybrid cloud, if you look at the kind of the top buzzwords, hybrid cloud probably ranks, it's not number one, it's close to the top. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what that is, and we'll give you some real practical use cases that you can really take advantage of this technology right now instead of having to develop a 2-year-long cloud strategy. Joining me to help with the conversation, I've asked Randall Van Allen. He is the CEO at Madison Cloud, a partner of ours. Randall, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, George, and thank you everyone for your time today. Also going to be joining me is our lead cloud architect, Rob Taylor, for anything technical we want to dive into or any questions that the audience may have for us later on.
Okay, sounds great. And then, Randall, before we go too far, why don't you give the folks just kind of a quick 30-second overview of Madison Cloud and what you guys do?
Sure. So Madison Cloud is private cloud storage. We are created completely or use StorONE's software-defined storage as the base of our cloud because it's just a storage cloud. So when we started developing our cloud, we did a lot of research into possible ways to manage our storage environments. Did a lot of research on software-defined storage that's out in the market. Came across StorONE. Did a lot of development with them, and basically their software blew everyone else's out of the competition. Don't mean to make you blush there, George, but we thought it was a good fit to build our cloud platform on. So what that allowed not only is for an immense amount of flexibility within our storage cloud, which is also private, which we'll get into later, but it allows for some interesting abilities as it relates to hybrid cloud and StorONE's footprint now and in the future for on-premise storage. So what it basically allowed is for, and we'll dive in deeper to this, but a unified platform that links your on-premise data with your cloud data, and then from there, we extended that whole environment to include other current cloud service providers like your Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. So in a nutshell, that is what Madison Cloud private cloud storage is, and we'll talk more as we go through.
Great. Thanks, Randall. Appreciate that. So let's kind of level set, and it's something that I feel like we're just kind of we're being a little too cloudy. Sorry, I couldn't resist. With all the different things, and because unfortunately I'm old enough to know that when we used to call a private cloud, like you're just running VMware. So let's kind of talk through these different things and just make sure we're level set on what we mean. So generally speaking, when I hear the term private cloud thrown around, it can, as anything in IT, it can mean a bunch of different things. But generally speaking, we are talking about an on-premises data center that, for the most part, has a lot of virtual machines. They probably still have some bare metal. I don't know about you, Randall, but I run into, especially database environments that tend to still have a propensity to be bare metal. And so that's kind of what we mean from a private cloud. Any other things you would add to that description?
Yeah, and you're right that there are a lot of different ways that term private cloud gets used. For our situation, why we are a private storage cloud, is we look at the difference between private and public as what infrastructure is shared within a data center, or in our case, a cloud environment. And we'll talk about public cloud like your AWS, but that is a 100% shared environment. So with our private cloud, and how we determine private cloud in general, is every one of our customers has their own dedicated storage server, the drives within, the networking within. In fact, the way we do our networking within our cloud is very isolated to keep each customer its own dedicated cloud, essentially. And then on the extra end of that, we customize the cloud to link up to, from a networking perspective, to any of the other clouds they may be using, as I mentioned earlier. But in this particular case, as we talk about hybrid, to connect their on-premise data center or infrastructure with their cloud. So the private mainly in us is how much of it is actually dedicated to those individual customers that isn't shared whatsoever. So there's a lot of security benefits to that we may touch on later.
Okay. And then, public cloud, I think, is probably the things that's probably most immediately recognizable to people, right? That you're going to default to probably Amazon, Azure, Google, those kind of guys. And that's not to slight Oracle or IBM or the couple dozen other that I might be missing. And then in hybrid, Randall, what we're talking about there, again, it's one of those terms that can mean a lot of different things to different people. But generally, we're talking about some sort of in-between point where you're going to, when I talk to customers who want to develop a quote-unquote hybrid cloud strategy, a lot of times they want to maybe burst a workload temporarily to the cloud, do some processing, bring it back in-house, or something of that nature. I think the challenge that we see with hybrid cloud, and also you and I did a webinar a few months ago on multi-cloud, is there's no intermediate storage location. As you and I have discussed in the past, the problem is that storage has gravity, and you just don't, move a petabyte up to the cloud in 30 seconds and move it back down in 30 seconds, right?
Not at all. That is a huge issue when it comes into data transfer and some of the issues that prevent the full hybrid cloud.
Yep.
But you're exactly right. If I may just add one more thing. So the hybrid cloud, also the overarching umbrella to really everything cloud, it's not only the ability to move between private and public clouds, but also the ability to move from cloud to your on-premises. So it really kind of covers everything that an organization could possibly do, where their data is located, and how to manage that has been getting incredibly complex because your data is going to be all over the place if you don't have a good management strategy.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's kind of talk about this, and this is where sort of that sort of that in between location, if you will, which is funny once we get into where the physical location of the in between location, it's really not in between at all. But I think what I think people are kind of looking for now is I think one of the things that attracts people to the cloud, generally speaking, is this concept of an OpEx purchasing model, right? I don't know from your world, but maybe you can kind of share some insight there. But is that one of the top motivators for people, is to shift to an OpEx model in addition to some of the other benefits of a hybrid or public cloud?
Yeah, it's certainly one of them. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting with conversations that I have with customers is how unique their use cases are. The reasons behind why they want to move to the cloud or incorporate cloud applications or services into their environment. And a lot of times, especially from a price perspective, it could be either it's more manageable in an OpEx way rather than CapEx, or it's less expensive if they do it correctly. A lot of times that is not the case. But price and the expense model is certainly one of the, I'd say, 4 or 5 reasons organizations look to cloud.
Okay. Yeah, it's never any one thing, I think, right? It's usually something that gets their attention, and then you kind of look at the other benefits. Now, this is a big one because I don't always understand what maybe people's impressions of a cloud are. I mean, obviously, non-IT folks might think it literally is floating in the cloud somewhere. But I mean, obviously, a cloud is a data center, right? There's no difference between, other than it might be like highly organized and have a lot of servers in it. There's really no fundamental difference really between Azure's data center, the data center that Madison Cloud buys, and the data center that the customer might have on-prem. It all has servers in it, it has storage in it, it has connected, there's connectivity in it, and it's really the people that make that difference. And a lot of these different cloud providers are actually in the same, I don't know if data center is the right word, but physical hosting facility, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure if, I guess we touch on this later, so I'll just kind of do it really quickly right now. But a good example to that is our networking is through data center called Equinix, which is worldwide. There's hundreds of them, I believe, all over, like globally. And our main networking hub is in Ashburn, Virginia, and we actually share networking with AWS, Microsoft, Google, IBM and Oracle are all around there. It's kind of like Data Center Alley in Ashburn, Virginia. But you're exactly right as it comes to, because everyone needs to be, I guess the closer everyone is geographically to one another, the faster they can connect. So 95% of the internet traffic in North America actually goes through my physical data center. So when it comes to, what is the cloud? You're right, it's just data centers. But the location of them is important depending on what you're doing. And also, as we touched on earlier in terms of public versus private, how shared is the infrastructure?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the other thing that will surprise people is, generally speaking, the cost of a private cloud, a private hybrid cloud, is either the same as, or in some cases better than what they're going to get from a public provider, correct?
It could absolutely be that way. It depends on how you set up your architecture. And it depends if you want to run your entire cloud private and you want to build it, at that point it's more like a co-location. But then all the price savings that you might have saved in terms of not having to manage it, not needing all the networking, not needing all the infrastructure and management, physical and otherwise, you're not really saving any money there. That's just another location. However, if you have a good balance of public versus private versus on-prem, there is a sweet spot there. Actually, it's a pretty big sweet spot, but it depends on what each customer is looking to do to definitely save money if you use private rather than public. A lot of the public clouds that are out there, the main ones that I mentioned earlier, they're not cheap, and those bills can get run up not only because of how they charge their customers, which is also incredibly complex, but it's also hard to manage it. So a lot of these organizations find out that most of their costs come from inefficiencies, where you're spinning up an application in Microsoft, for example, and maybe you're only utilizing 5% of that actual application, but you have data there, but the data requires certain costs per month, and then all of a sudden you're getting this several, $5,000-$10,000 bill, and you're like, I'm not even using it that much, but the same thing's happening for your Google or your AWS or IBM or whatever. So it can get out of control really, really quickly. So adding a private cloud aspect to it gives you a little more control over preventing those costs from getting out of hand.
I would also think, Randall, and this might be a curveball, so we'll just delete this section if it doesn't work. But I would also think that in the private hybrid cloud use case, the way you've got it set up specifically, I think, is it's easier for the customer to figure out how much it's going to cost. Because what I hear repeatedly from customers that are using any of the public cloud providers really is that trying to figure out how they're charging you is more complex than trying to figure out, the old cell phone bills when you could never figure out what you were really getting charged for.
Oh yeah.
I saw a thing. I think it was Gartner or somebody said that they were speaking and they said, look, the number one hire for enterprises this year, this was a year or two ago, is somebody full time to decipher your cloud bill. I don't know. That seems like horribly wrong. So, but my guess is that in this private model, like you've got set up, it's probably a lot easier for the customer to figure out exactly what they're paying for, right?
Yeah, well, you got that right. But I tell you what, also a really good business to be in is those consultants. There are a lot of very, very highly paid consultants and analysts that these large organizations hire to be like, what is going on with our cloud costs? And not only is there the unpredictability in it, but everything is variable. Everything. And when you're dealing with, you have dozens and dozens of developers and you're running these applications and there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of variables all playing a part into this ultimate invoice you get at the end on, page 87, where you can actually find out what it all adds up to. It's very complex, and people usually just throw their hands up and don't care. So getting to, what we do at Madison Cloud, we make that as easy as possible. It's 3 or 4 line items in terms of capacity and networking and, exactly what you're doing there. And then that's it. And then it's a fixed price. It doesn't change unless you want to change one of the 3 or 4 variables above it. But it couldn't be more easy to understand, predictable, which allows you to, again, the advantage of that private cloud is have a good handle on your costs and what to expect as you're making forecasts for your management down the line.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that could be your new tagline: no analyst required, or something.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, like I said, those analysts aren't cheap either. So. Throw it all together. So cost savings.
So let's kind of put this. I like to get like real tactical with stuff. So let's kind of give the folks sort of a tactical use case, because my fear sometimes with cloud stuff, it kind of sounds all pie in the sky, and how do I get there and how am I going to use it? So what we wanted to do is give people. This is something that everybody needs, and that everybody's struggling with, and that I think that the solution that we're talking about here can really solve the problem, right? And so, as you know, Randall, at StorONE, we go around telling people all the time that they can replace backup, and I get, varying degrees of response to that as far as, do they believe me and things like that. And so I'm going to build a case for that, and then I'm going to show how we at StorONE use Madison Cloud to kind of resolve, to me, the legitimate objection that comes up, right? So from a software perspective, we're known for very, very high performance. We're known for very affordable pricing. We're still, as far as I know, the only company that's put pricing publicly available on the website. But none of that matters if we lose your data. So we do great things to make sure that we don't lose data. So we have very high data integrity. We can deliver high performance without caching. We have an advanced form of RAID that we call VRAID that gives you immense levels of flexibility. It has incredibly rapid rebuilds. We're now seeing rebuilds from flash drives measured in 5 or 6 minutes, hard disk drives, even high capacity ones, in 6 to 8 hours, right? So very, very fast rebuilds. We have snapshots. You can take unlimited number of snapshots, and that's sort of the starting point, right? It gives us that point-in-time capability that you would typically count on backup software for. You can take a snapshot up to every 3 minutes. You can retain that snapshot essentially forever, but let's just say indefinitely. And then it's very easy to go back in time and figure out what's in a snapshot and recover it. So all that works, and most importantly, none of that impacts performance. The other thing we have, and this is the key part, so if you're a veteran IT guy, what you're going to say at that point, if I stopped right there, was, okay, that's great, but what if the whole system fails? You're right, because my snapshots just went with the system. So the answer to that is affordable replication, right? And it's included in our software. But the challenge we'll almost always run into is affordable replication requires an affordable destination. And so there's a whole host of people that don't have what I would consider to be a data center quality remote destination, or they don't want to be in the kind of data center business or real estate business to that level and have that. And that's where I think, Randall, our partnership from just a very tactical level makes a lot of sense, right? Is leverage your guys' private hybrid cloud storage to kind of complete this replace backup promise. And so what I think where we're seeing people get into it is this concept of being able to use an OpEx-based DR target, because you're not going to, and in many cases, you're not going to need to replicate everything, just the real critical assets. And so I can scale that target side need with your guys, the way you guys, put the solution together based on my demands and my needs, correct?
Yep, absolutely. And I think one of the beauties of it that you may be touching on, so forgive me if I'm stealing your thunder here, is that it doesn't need to be an identical system. And that's something that if you are working with a lot of the traditional enterprise storage vendors, that they say, okay, well, we have a built-in replication, but your target needs to be the exact same as your destination. Source, excuse me. Your source environment needs to be identical as your target environment, and that may just be unnecessary. It's also incredibly inefficient if you use performance tiering with higher level drives. So maybe that's what you're going to get into next, but that is also one of the really big difficulties, or I should say barriers to a replication strategy, to a backup strategy for disaster recovery or multiple sites.
And you did a good job there, because I actually forgot to put that bullet in, so that was good. We should do more webinars.
Yeah. Turns out I know a little bit about StorONE software.
Exactly. So that is a key point. It's very common, especially nowadays, for customers to say, "Hey, I want an all-flash array." But that doesn't necessarily mean, nor does it necessarily make sense, that you would have an all-flash array at your DR site. I mean, this is a system that, if you use it at all, you're going to use it maybe to recover data, and at that point, you don't really care about as long as it's not terrible, you don't really care about the performance. Or you're going to use it to fail to, and in that case, that's not going to, hopefully, unless you're like in the middle of a war zone, you're not going to be declaring a disaster every day. So what we typically would recommend for a customer that has all flash in their primary is to use hybrid in their secondary. So, a small flash tier, so that when you do fail over, performance is acceptable, but then keep the historical data, if you will, on a hard drive, right? I've never seen a situation during a disaster where the customer comes to me and says, hey, I need a copy of that database from 3 years ago, right? The only thing you care about is yesterday's or today's copy of that database. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a huge advantage. And as far as I know, we're the only ones that can do that. So I think the other real great part of it, so this is, to me, this solves an immediate pressing problem that I think most organizations and IT professionals face. The barrier to entry is super easy. Between us and Madison Cloud, we'll walk you through the whole process. It'll be very, very easy for you to set up. The software's the same on both sides, so all of that works very, very well. What I like about it, though, it's not just sometimes you do something easy and then you can't do anything else with it, right? What's great about this is now we've set the foundation to do all the other cool stuff that Madison can do. And so I'm going to just take them real quickly through this slide, Randall, and then I'll let you kind of go in detail about it on the next one. But you know, with this now, the data is there, right? We've got it in Madison's cloud. It's in that Equinix data center, ready to be accessed. And because of the way we replicated it, we could very easily then take a snapshot of that data and present it as a working copy that you could then connect to from compute with Amazon, Azure, or Google. So all of a sudden now, the ability to leverage those other environments for analytics, reporting, test dev, maybe an eventual total migration now exists, right? And so now we've solved an immediate pressing problem and then perfectly set the table for you to then move into that next step. So it's sort of like, I like it when I can solve a tactical problem and look like I was being very strategic while I was doing it, and that's exactly what we're able to set up here for you. So Randall, why don't I move it to this slide right here, and why don't you take the folks, let me kind of build this out just so you can kind of talk to it all at once, because you know how much I like animation. Why don't you kind of talk to kind of what that capability starts to look like once the customer has their data in your cloud?
Sure. Well, so I think your use case, the disaster recovery use case, is a really good starting point to kind of illustrate how powerful this solution is. So let's just say at the most basic level, you have your on-premise data center, you have, you know, or infrastructure, server rooms sometimes, maybe it's just a couple tower servers. It doesn't really matter. But you want to back it up. You want to get it off-premise somewhere else just in case something happens. And the point, again, just to illustrate again earlier, is that it doesn't need to be an identical infrastructure. If you have all SSDs in your on-prem, maybe you just want some low-cost, just a hard drive space in Madison Cloud. So you do that because there's StorONE on both sides with built-in replication. You don't need anything else. In fact, because again, because it's the same software on both sides, you can actually manage both individual sites from an individual management console. So you can just pull up, and this console you can use from your iPad or your tablet or your phone, and you can see the two different sites and you can manage it. You can see how the replication is going. And one little sidebar here is that connection is not through the internet. We would recommend it's not through. It could be through the internet, but because we are in such a well-connected data center, we're actually in Equinix and Digital Realty, but we utilize the Equinix Cloud Exchange for connections to your ISPs. So if you're using AT&T or Verizon or any of the other ones in your on-premise data center, we can actually set up a private line. So you can have a secure, high-speed connection for your backups from your on-premise to Madison Cloud. So now that the data is going back and forth, let's just say it is for disaster recovery at first, or that's the starting point. Now, we're just a storage cloud. Now, here's where you can really get a whole bunch of savings, which you haven't already realized, or you have already realized, by utilizing the cost savings of a private cloud and the way we have our architecture, but also the fact that you don't need SSDs and all this high performing in our cloud. But all the applications, let's just say something, your whole first site goes down. You don't have to have all those applications just running 100% of the time in these other clouds. Now, I guess I don't want to get ahead of myself. Maybe I'll set this up. That was the animation. That was the point of the animation there. So after the data is in Madison Cloud, your disaster recovery is set up from a data perspective. Your data is safe. Now, from Madison Cloud, that's what George was talking about earlier. It allows flexibility, do all sorts of cool stuff. He mentioned some DevOps stuff. So we direct connect, again, through Equinix Cloud Exchange, to whatever cloud provider you're using. Now, the data stays in Madison Cloud. So similar to what centralized storage did for the on-prem data center, where you have all your, let's just say, virtualized machines running on your those hosts, and then they all just connect to your SAN or NAS. This is pretty much the same thing that we're doing in the cloud. So your applications, your virtual machines, your any type of other cloud services you're running in, your AWS, your Google, any of those still take place there, just like the virtual machine host you have in your data center, but they're just talking to Madison Cloud. And because we are physically located right next to them, it's very high performing. So once you kind of have that set up, it allows you to do all sorts of flexible things with moving data seamlessly across your entire environment, because to be honest, it's really only your on-prem, which could be one location. It could be several. If you have a whole bunch of remote offices, easy enough. You just put a tiny little StorONE instance into those, and the same thing happens. Now, built-in replication, everything takes care of itself. You can view everything from a single management console, but now it extends that to the cloud. Once your data is in Madison Cloud, now that's the connection point to all your other cloud service providers that run the compute, the applications, and the services. So then you can start getting an idea about the limitless flexibility. And as it related back to our DR use case, you don't have to keep all these application services running all the time in the compute clouds. Let's just say you use AWS and you want to run your applications in there. One of the beauties of cloud in general is that you can spin it up or spin down as you need. Now, it's a little different with our private cloud because we're building your physical cloud. But in terms of the applications, you can just set it up, you do your tests, you know it works, and then you just shut it all off. And then you're paying 0 to minimal per month. And if you ever actually need to use that for disaster recovery, your data is already sitting in the cloud right next to it. You flip the switch, you spin up all those instances in AWS in this scenario, and you can run from there. So this slide kind of shows the full kind of umbrella management and ability to manage your data from anywhere. You always know where it is. It's private. It's secure. You can add on or subtract any cloud services that you may want to use. Obviously, I just have Microsoft, Google, and AWS here, but it's really almost any cloud that we'd be able to connect to. So, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. It's that limitless flexibility with a big emphasis on your data security, and you know where it is all the time. And it also saves money, too. So what more do you need, right?
Well, it's a good thing to end with, that's for sure. So, and I think that's, if you're listening, I think that's the real opportunity here for you, is that you can start with an on-premise solution, reduce costs, improve performance, improve data protection, develop a way to eliminate backups, have built-in disaster recovery using the Madison Cloud solution, and then be able to extend into Azure, Google, AWS, and everybody else, right? So it's a really good concept. We've got the ability to demonstrate this to you, so if you want more details, feel free to reach out to us either through the feedback section that'll come up here at the end of the webinar, or you could just type it in as a question, say contact me or whatever, and we'll be happy to do that. So let's kind of just wrap up here. I accidentally put 2 slides in at the same time. We sort of talked about that. Just the combination really makes for a good solution for everybody. And again, we can do all the different technologies. So we kind of ran over our mark a little bit, so what we'll do is for the questions that are in the queue, we'll take those offline and respond to you directly. If you're watching on demand, please feel free to still key your questions in. I get notified that you asked a question, and we'll answer every single question that comes in. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, I think the website for both of us is the best way to go. But there's additional contact vehicles there also. So, hey, Randall, thanks for jumping on the webinar and helping us out with the presentation today.
Yeah, it's been fun. Appreciate it, George, and thanks everyone for your time.
No problem. And again, I want to thank you guys for joining us. Again, if you're watching on demand and you have a question, please go ahead and key that into the questions box. We'll be happy to help you out. For now, though, I'm George Crump, Chief Marketing Officer at StorONE. Have a great day.